pentatonic scale, key of C major or A minor. Get ready because we're about to rock and or roll. Here we are on our worksheet, remembering that we're going to be representing the big string on top, the low E string on top. Justification for that being that we are imagining ourselves behind the guitar, looking over the guitar or through the guitar here, which would result in the big E string on top in the tablature, as opposed to flipping the guitar around this way so that the little E would be on top. I believe that this would be the most intuitive way to construct the tablature, although you will have to then think about any tabs you are looking at to determine how they are structuring the tab. Also note that this is going to be the 0 here representing the open frets, meaning we're not holding anything down in terms of the open frets, we're just strumming the open string. Then we have the first fret here. This would be where you would be fingering the first fret, second fret, third fret, and so on and so forth. We're going to start out in the key of C major, which is a traditional place to start out in music theory, given the fact that we don't have any sharps and flats. But we also want to note that the relative minor is A minor, and with the guitar, the A minor is as important, if not more important, oftentimes than the C major, given the fact that the minor scale has this nice open note for the A, where you don't have any open note for C, which is really nice to have. So many people look at this first position and actually see it as an A type of scale, may not even really realize it's a minor scale because it starts at the A, and the A scale is really a useful scale to be playing in on the guitar. But this scale is actually going to be a C major scale, or you can think about it as an A minor scale. And how would you be differentiating between a major scale and a minor scale? If you have the same notes in both of them, it means that you're going to be playing more around one or the other note. So if I was to play in the scale and I was to hover around the A's notes in the scale, it would sound more like an A minor type of progression, especially if I rang out this open A, this nice bassy, more bassy note of the open A. On the other hand, if I was to then play around more often the C notes in this progression, it would sound more like a C progression, especially if we were starting to hit more of those lower types of C notes as we go through our progression. So that's the general idea of going between the C and the A. The more kind of controversial thing would be, well, how am I going to name this type of position on the guitar? Because I can play these same notes for multiple areas on the guitar. What I would like to do is be able to structure where my fingers are in a particular position. Now, I would name this position 1 for multiple reasons. One, you might say, well, why would you name that position 1? You should name position 1 the one that's back here in the open position. And the reason I don't do that, and I think the reason that many people kind of think of this as their position 1, is first, it's in the middle of the guitar. So this is your home base position, and it gives you the most flexibility to learn by going both ways, to the left and to the right. So, and if you go to the left, you're going to head back on over to those open positions, which you have some familiarity with because you're probably learning open positions on the left as well. So it's a great place to keep as your home base that you can basically flow out from in both directions. It's also, this actual shape is probably the most common rock and roll or guitar type of shape. It's probably the first shape that people learn, and they probably learn it in this position even if they don't know why, because it happens to be in the key of C major and or A minor. So they might just start learning this shape, just saying, hey, that's where you learn it, basically right here. So a lot of people will see this position as the major kind of structure that they'll be taking a look at, and they will see it basically in position 5 as kind of like their home base. Therefore, I would name it position 1, even though that might not be a universal kind of naming. Now, as we go through the caged system, we'll see other ways that we can basically structure the names of these things. We can use the actual shapes of the notes that we're going to be constructing, like a C shape and an A shape and a D shape and a G shape, as another alternative way to name the positions, which is another kind of convention that can also be used to name basically the pentatonic shape and the major scale shapes. It's another way that you can just structure it in your mind to know where you are on the fretboard. The more ways you can think about where you're structuring where you are on the fretboard, then the better you're able to see things, because you can actually see things multiple different ways. You don't want to just stop at one. You'd like to be able to see it different ways. And the more likely you'll be able to communicate with other people who learned things, different ways, and you'd like to be able to communicate with whatever way they see it, and that will strengthen however you're putting things together. Now, note that if we look at the pentatonic scale with regards to just the music theory of it, I listed out basically the notes of the musical alphabet twice here, so 2 rounds on it, and you could just use this to copy and paste your structure here. So if I was to say start out on the key of C, and we were copying all the way to C again, C to C, we would have this structure. If we applied our whole half kind of scale structure on it, meaning if I go from C to D, that's a whole step, D to E is a whole step, E to F is a half step, F to G is a whole step, G to A is a whole step, A to B is a whole step, and then back to C is a half step. That's the traditional progression in terms of links, if you were kind of looking at it from a distance perspective to construct a scale. And if we start off on C, of course, we end up with all the notes without having any sharps and flats in it, which would be C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and then start back over at C again. Now, when we look at the pentatonic scale, what we're going to do is pick 5 of those notes. So you can think about it this way. If this is my C scale, what we're going to do to make the major scale is pick every other note, which would be C, skipping D to get to E, skipping F to get to G. That would be my major 3 notes. That's going to be inside my shape here. So we're going to have the C note, we're going to have the E note, and we are going to have the G note that is going to be included here. But we're also the D and the A. So really we got these 2. If I was to highlight these 2 in the pentatonic scale, I'm going to right click and put a little icon there. And then we've got this item right there. And then we've got the G and the A. So we've got these 2. That's going to be our 5 notes in the pentatonic scale. We removed from the full scale the F and the B. Now you might say, well, why did we remove the F and the B? You can get into music theory as to why you have removed those. But just from a practical kind of standpoint, if you were playing a song in the key of C, and possibly it's in the key of C, but it's going to be progressing possibly to multiple different notes in the song or different chords in the song. For example, it might have a C chord and then go to the 4 chord, an F chord, and then the 5 chord, which is a G chord. In that instance, you might play some notes over the top of it to complement it in the key of C, and you might try to switch what you're playing in to an F or a G as the song progresses, or you might just stay in the key of C, which is probably the safest scale if you're going to stay in one scale to try to complement the song. And for some reason, the 5 pentatonic scales, if you were to do that, typically seem to be the safest place to be. So if you were to be following along with a song in the key of C that's playing different notes, and you were to say, what can I do to play along with the song to add a melody on with it, then the safest thing to do would be to play in the actual arpeggio, which would be the 3 notes. And then the next safest thing to do would be to play in the pentatonic scale. And then the next safest thing to do would be to add the other 2 notes, playing the full C scale, playing notes within the full C scale. And then the next thing you can do is try to experiment borrowing notes from basically other keys, which of course you would think then would be the other chords in the song, which might be an F or a G in that case. So that's one way you can kind of apply this stuff out. Now note then that once you have your notes here, you also can think about how can I use that to make chords in a song. What are the common chord progressions? You can number basically these notes 1 to 7, and then this is the common chord progression you would have for a song in a major kind of key. You would have then the large, or the ones in black and white would be then the major notes, and then the major chords and the minor chords. So you'd have a major C, minor D, minor E, major F, major G, minor A, minor B, and then back to the C here. This last one would be a diminished on the 7th. So you don't have to, a lot of times that just gets dropped off in most music. So you kind of don't worry about the 7th, and you kind of play from 1 to 6. Common chord progressions would be the 1, 4, 5. So the 1, 4, 5 in the key of C would be the C, the F, and the G. And once you know that, then you can kind of use these scales to play over the top of it or kind of complement it in some ways. So that's the idea here. Now then, if I was to start here and I was to call that position 1, if I moved up here, I would call this position 2. So this is going to be position 2. You can see there's overlap with position 1, and you can see you have the same notes involved here. So as I move up, in essence, I'm playing kind of the same notes in another octave up the guitar. And if you have one person that's playing down here in the open position, possibly playing the 1, 4, 5 progressions in the open positions, hitting those lower notes, then you can kind of move up the guitar and you can complement it up top in a position that's going to have another vocality to it, another voicing to it up top using the notes up here. And again, you can use these same notes in a new position, a higher octave, to basically play the safest position, which would be then to arpeggiate the notes in the C scale for playing a song in the key of C, and then the next safest position would be any of the blue notes here, and then the next safest position would be to expand to the keys in the major scale, and then expand to the other notes that are, or chords in the song and the notes in that scale. If you moved it up here, I would call this position 3 up here, which is related to position 2. They have, you can see the same notes are going to be involved in position 3, but they'll be an octave up, the voicing being higher. If you can understand the notes up here, that again, you can complement someone that is voicing something down here, possibly with open chords, with something up here that will give it a nice complement. And obviously the complementing up here is something with guitarists that, you know, people don't know quite as much, right? So you can add something by being able to do that. If you moved it up to 12, you'd be what I would call position 4. Notice this is all the way back up to when the notes are starting here, because the fretboard starts over. So if I was to go the other way, if I started at position 5 here, this is where it gets a little funny because there's only 5 positions. So what is on this side? What is over here? Well, if this is position 1, I'm sorry, this is position 1, then behind that, you're going to have position 5. So position 5 is going to connect to position 1. That's where it gets a little bit confusing to people. They'll say, well, I would want to start from position 1 back here. But no matter what you do, because when you go into different keys, it's going to wrap around the fretboard. And like I say, I think that most people kind of learn that position 1 in the major scale in that kind of rock and roll position. So that would mean that this then is going to be position 5 that in the key of C. And then if you go down here, you're going to be in position 4 in the key of C. Now what we're going to do after this point in time is we'll try to think about these positions with regards to the shapes that are going to be in those positions, which could give you an alternative name for naming these positions. You might not like calling them. It might be kind of arbitrary to you to say this is position 1 in the middle of the guitar. Maybe I want to name that with the shape of the chord that I already know and name it with a shape like a G shape. I know this is a G shape kind of thing that happens to be in the C chord kind of position. So we'll start to think about that next.